Hello and welcome to episode 224B of Something About The Beatles podcast. If you are just now tuning into the show for the first time, I am Robert Rodriguez, the host, creator of the show in 2013. 2017, there was a reboot, and we're just over 100 episodes in of the new version, which is more or less a straight-up interview show with loads and loads of guests, Beatle witnesses, scholars, academics, filmmakers, musicians, Beatles specialists that I have on the show to hash out various topics or projects or any aspect you can think of. Beatle history, art, work, etc. And coming off the heels of Thanksgiving, as you may know, we are now into part 2 of the 3-part conversation with director Peter Jackson of the Beatles Get Back, the sort of reimagining of the Let It Be project on film, nearly 8 hours long. I'm sure most of you listening to this have already seen it once. Some of you might be on your second viewing or even more than that, because it is the gift that keeps on giving. There is so much in there to examine and parse out, and bears repeat viewings for the things that you notice on repeat viewings. And we will be talking about it on the show probably for the foreseeable future. We'll break it up with other topics along the way, but I can tell you this, just taped for January, it will be a multi-parter, is the musician's take on Peter Jackson's Get Back, to which I have a couple returning guests to the show. Luther, of course, when it comes to things concerning Beatles and a musician's point of view, but also Pat Sansone from Wilco, whom you guys loved on the Sgt. Pepper discussion this year. Also, Orion Salazar, returning guest from formerly Third Eye Blind, Fungo Mungo, great guy, big Beatle guy, and a dear friend. And we'll have him on as part of the panel, as well as a new to SATB guest musician. If you can think about what instrument has been represented in the aforementioned between Luther, Pat, and Orion, maybe you'll come close. I'm not going to tip my hand just yet. He has to wait till January to find out who it is I'm talking about. A good friend and somebody who's got a lot to say about the Beatles. Boy, you sit him down any time and you will get a discussion and a half, because he's been spending the last 50-odd years thinking about it. Anyway, Peter Jackson. So here we are in the second hour of the 3-hour conversation he gave us, and just to skim the surface of things we'll be talking about, we talk a bit about, we start out the conversation with the February 1969 so-called mystery session. Now, he's talking about some specific photographs, which in the video version we'll be posting on YouTube. You'll see the pictures, but I think most Beatle fans are familiar with them since they ran in the original 1970 Let It Be Book of Ethan Russell photographs. But it's a particular set of pictures. The one prominent one features the view of the studio from behind Ringo, showing the other 3 Beatles looking in his direction. You see Heather in there. We talk about that a bit because it's something that has been talked about a lot, and we're still trying to figure out what the hell is going on in this picture. So you'll hear us talking about that a bit. We talk about Glyn Johns. We talk about what the Beatles' intent might have been as of January 30th, 31st for the final shape and form of the album that they were recording that ended up going off track along the way and becoming 2 albums, the eventual Let It Be album and Abbey Road. So that's something to consider, considering the evidence we have from January 69 of where their direction seemed to lay for completing that album that they started on January 2nd. We also talk about the technical challenges and how Peter was able to separate what had been locked up essentially all these years on the Nagra reels, all the dialogue, and in some cases music, that because of various crosstalk or background sounds, or when John and George especially were sabotaging conversations by playing their guitar loud when there were discussions going on, how he was able to just strip all that away and get down to actually what was going on. So we talk about that a bit, and any number of other things along the way. But this is just the second hour. We still have another hour to go, which should be up within a week. I was going to point out to you guys that there have been a number of people calling out for SATB to come to Spotify. It was on Spotify briefly, and then it wasn't, and now it isn't. But guess what? It is coming back, and it's going to be out under the name, not Something About the Beatles, but SATB Raw. SATB Raw. In that, it's going to be just the conversation. No bells and whistles, no production. It's just going to be the conversations. So you'll find it on Spotify coming soon. You'll also find the conversations in the same form on YouTube. So look for that if that's the way you like to hear things. I'll be posting some video from time to time, including excerpts from the actual visual of the Peter Jackson conversation. But I've got some shows posted now. So you'll be able to find them on YouTube as well. And that'll be a developing outlet for Something About the Beatles going forward. Any event, welcome to the show if you're just now catching it for the first time. I'm glad you're returning to catch the second hour of the Peter Jackson conversation if you were here last time, which wasn't that long ago, and hope you'll tune in very soon for part 3, which will be coming before Christmas. And I guarantee you we'll have another show or two before the end of the year. So feast or famine, that one won't be a Get Back show. That'll just be kind of a fun, lightweight holiday listening show. But then we'll go back to the Get Back documentary with the musician panel coming in January and whatever else I've got in my pocket along the way. Lots of content, lots of shows, lots of things to talk about. And hopefully this will not be the last of Peter Jackson and SATB. But let's see what he has to say now in hour 2 of our conversation. Now, as we know from even the original book that came with the box set in 1970, even though it was supposed to wrap on January 31st, there were sessions held in February to cover some bases, recut the Don't Let Me Down.
I'm interested in those. Those are a mystery to me to some degree. I mean, there's clues. I'd love to hear what you guys know about those.
Well, we know that John recut the vocal to Don't Let Me Down, and maybe because what you'd alluded to earlier, that when they cut the master, they were a little sloshed that day, and maybe he wanted to redo his vocal for that reason.
I see. So the Don't Let Me Down that we have in our movie, because we say this is a take that was used in the as the B-side, that's not the same vocal.
Right, he recut the vocal.
Well, you'll have to forgive me when you see the film and it says this is a take that they use on the B-side, and I didn't realize that they changed.
It's mostly the master, yeah. But the thing that I thought was interesting was, number one, Paul knows this thing's on the horizon at the end of '68, and that's when he starts growing his beard out, when he's on vacation in Portugal with Hunter Davies and Linda, and goes through the entire month with the beard on. As soon as he believes it's over, he shaves it off. So then when they've got those pictures that were taken of the add-on sessions, so I was wondering, was there footage of anything that came after January 31st?
I tell you what, I was looking at those photos the other day. I'm just going to get them quick. I've got an iPad here which has got stuff on. Let me.
Isn't it a script that Ringo has near his drum set?
Yeah.
I'll show you.
Of Magic Christian?
Well, he's got the Magic Christian script a lot at times. He hasn't read the script. Most of the conversations, as you probably know, he says, I haven't read the script yet, or it keeps changing on me, so I haven't got down and read it all. I'm waiting till it's all finished or something before he reads it. Yeah, those photos, see, Heather's there, so that gives you a clue that it's probably a Saturday or Sunday. Having her there, it's probably not a school day. So,
and Dan, as you know, there was surgery that George had, like the first week of February.
George had the tonsils. Yeah, the tonsils.
What dates were those? Because George is in these photos.
It was after that. Well, or no, it was. I'm sorry. Didn't
he have the surgery like 6th or 7th of February, and then the session was like the 21st, 22nd?
The session came after that. Yes, the session came after. Yep.
Because you've got John with the beginnings of his beard, but only the very beginning. Like he's only just been 2 or 3 days of beard growth. That's about to become the big Montreal or the Amsterdam beard, isn't it?
March 1st, they're at Lady Mitchell Hall doing that Yoko thing. And you see it's a little bit more growth than you see there. So that dates it to late February.
So this is sort of the second half of February.
It was February 7th.
Yeah, okay.
February 7th was the tonsillectomy.
You go through these photos. One is you see this one. Now, as far as I'm aware, there is no film from those sessions. However, one of the photos has got Les Parrott, one of the camera operators of the Get Back sessions, with a camera. Now, unless Ethan's got his photos muddled up and out of order, and this is a photo from January, this is in the middle of the February photos. You've got that picture there.
Is there any way of knowing from the background or anything where they're at? Because I believe that late February session was at Trident, wasn't it?
Trident, yeah.
No. You see, now we're getting interesting. Now it gets very mysterious, because here is over Ringo's shoulder on the drum. Now you can't probably see this very well. That's Savile Row. Believe me, it's Savile Row. Green carpet, the windows at the back of the same. That's Savile Row. Now it's not supposed to be Savile Row. I know it's supposed to be Trident. The other thing that's weird is look behind George. There's an upright piano, and there was in January. There's no upright piano in that room. There's the Bluthner, and there's there's electric one, an organ or something, and there's no upright piano. Now an upright piano has been brought in for some reason or another, and I wondered if these were rehearsal sessions. You know, they were rehearsing prior to Trident, But then there's so many microphones and equipment and cables, and the cables are running through the doorway, up the corridor towards the control room. It's not like they've stripped the control room.
No, but that was where they started the initial takes of I Want You, She's So Heavy.
I Want You.
You're saying we think it's a Trident, though? Because there's no record of the Abbey Road, or is it, am I wrong?
The person to ask would be Jerry Hammock, but I know for certain the first half of the master of I Want You, She's So Heavy was tracked in February, I believe at Trident, and the second half was at EMI.
Glyn John says he was in Los Angeles with the Steve Miller Band, came back. They gave him permission to come back to London for a few days to go to Trident to do I Want You, She's So Heavy then before he went back again. Glyn said, I've spoken to Glyn, and he said, no, I was never in Savile Row. That was done at Trident. If you look at this photo here, is Paul, if you zoom this photo up, that looks like Glyn John's.
Have you shown him this?
No, but I'm about to, because I've only just spotted it. And there's also this photo, and that looks like Glyn Johns to me. We're very familiar with the clothing after 4 years. That blue sort of shirt with the red trim, that is not a January shirt that Glyn Johns ever wears. He never see that him in that bit of clothing in January.
Is that the apple green carpet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's apple for sure. Yeah. Then I've got Glyn's diary for '69. It's a booking. It's not diary. It's like a sort of a booking thing. This is all January, and it says Beatles all the way down to the month of January. But the month of February the 1st, to USA, Steve Miller, LP, 1st of February. 2nd of January, Sunday to San Francisco. 3rd of February, session 6 to 12. This is with Steve Miller in San Francisco, by the looks of it. 4th session with Steve Miller, 5th session with Steve Miller. Goes on down here, and then he goes on the 13th of February. He goes traveling to London, cab to the airport, and San Francisco costs $14. Then you get to the 14th of February, appointments in Apple. Now, that's not Trident, that's Apple.
The 22nd is Trident.
Yep, it says right there, yeah.
Yeah, so there's these dates. Now, those photographs where Glyn's sitting around in Apple must be one of these dates here. And you'd probably look towards a Saturday or Sunday, probably, because it's got little Heather there, which would tend to be. So, I mean, there's information, but there doesn't seem to be a single record of the full studio. You know, they don't seem to be as organized as Abbey Road booking sheets. There might be deep in the archives of Apple, they might have that stuff, but it hasn't appeared, and so we don't know what. But what are they doing there? I think they're doing well. Mark Lewisham book and everything else is very clearly the next, after the 1st of January, George has this thing, Glyn's in the States, they get together in Trident, which I guess is this one here. Trident is the 22nd. Saturday, it was the Beatles from 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. in Trident, 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. in Trident. But there's about 4 or 5 sessions that seemingly look like they're at the Apple studio prior to that. Mm-hmm. What are they doing? Because you see, I've got this theory, personal theory. It's not a theory, I don't want to make it sound, I just wonder, I'll put it this way, I don't want to sound really like a dork. I just wonder whether or not the Get Back sessions were continuing. Because is the 22nd of February at Trident, I Want You, She's So Heavy, is that the beginning of Abbey Road, or are they still working on Get Back?
They didn't have 14 new songs like you would assume they would.
They had 9.
Yeah.
They had 9. January the 31st, they have 9 songs that are good enough to put onto an LP.
Right. So in February, maybe they're trying to tack on.
Yeah. And the songs, and I think, Where's Your Ringo Song? Well, Octopus Garden is floating around. So could that be? Now, obviously, it wasn't in a finished state back in Savile Row in January, but it doesn't take long to work up a song like that. George was having his tonsils out. I guess technically Ringo was started filming, so it would have been hard for him to work on the song. But are they trying to do a Ringo song? Are they trying to do something? Because they've only got one George song. They've only got For You, Blue, by the time January comes to an end.
Right, because they never went back to I May Mine until the following year.
Old Brown Shoe was around.
Because you have to imagine that at least at some point post-January, there was still the concept of 12 or 14 songs, 2 George songs, 1 Ringo song, or at least 1 Ringo vocal. You know, you've got to imagine that was still going to be the kind of pattern to a point. And then at some point, it morphed into what it turned out to be, you know. And I think that some of these songs, like Something, I Want You, She's So Heavy, I would imagine they eventually decided, or not eventually, maybe quite quickly decided that, okay, they're fine for the Get Back, but they're still sticking with the no overdubs, no edit sort of rule. And they thought, God, Something would sound fantastic if we could actually just do it the old-fashioned way with overdubs. an extra instrument. And I Want You, She's So Heavy would sound fantastic if we could multi-track all the guitar to make it really, really heavy. So I just wonder if they persevered with those for a short time for Get Back, and then just thought, God, they would be so much better if we plastered extra tracks on them. And they sort of just absorbed those into the beginning of their next album. And Glenn was just left to sort of, well, you've got 9 songs, Glenn, get a few old rock and roll songs, get Save the Last Dance for Me, a few other things, and just tack them on. I wonder if that's because I mean, Teddy Boy goes on to Glenn's album, even though Teddy Boy is not by any means a finished recording. It's a sort of a run through. It's like it's not even a rehearsal. It's just a run through. I mean, Glyn Johns and Phil Spector had the same problem. They sort of ended up with sort of 9 songs, and they sort of always had 9 songs. And Glyn solved it his way, and then Phil Spector solved it his way by getting Across the Universe and I Me Mine got recorded, and didn't he reprise Get Back at the end? So Glyn and Phil Spector had the same problem, which of 99 songs, which they kind of solved in 2 different ways, which is sort of interesting, isn't it? But apart from that, I think there was a period. I wonder if there was a period where Get Back was going to have a few of those I Want You, She's So Heavy, Octopus Garden, something type songs, or
maybe Old Brown Shoe. Because that's an organic song, and you've got your upright piano in the corner there. They could have knocked it out.
Well, maybe the upright, because did that upright piano come in for a particular purpose? Did somebody say Old Brown Shoe would sound great on an upright piano, that the Bluthner sound isn't right for Old Brown Shoe? And George didn't like the Bluthner for You Blue. He wanted it all dirtied up. And so maybe George asked for the upright to come in, because in those mysterious February sessions, they were going to have a crack at Old Brown Shoe. Yeah, it could be. Because that upright piano's there for a reason. I don't think it would have just been, well, what are we lacking in the studio? Well, it'd be nice to have an upright piano, which we don't know what we're going to use it for. But I think that came in because there was a particular purpose for it. Yeah, I mean, Old Brown Shoe would be certainly a contender for that, for sure, yeah. And it would give you your second George song, so.
It's something that didn't need the full production on it.
But you even hear at the end, and I happen to be listening to the 29th, so I guess the third from last day, earlier today, and you hear them, they're not just jamming on I Want You, She's So Heavy. They are actively trying to write it and make it into something. And even though these sessions are 48 hours from being done, they are actively trying to write this new song.
Well, you see, the thing is that they might not be 48 hours from being done.
That's true.
That's the point.
That's true.
They might not be. They're going to lose Glyn. He's got to be away on February the 1st. Now, I think they wait for Glyn to come back. Put it this way, why does Glyn ask Steve Miller if he could have permission to go back to London, which I understand is what happened, and he says, and Steve Miller let him go off for a week or 2, because Glyn goes straight to the States to finish off Steve Miller. He goes back to the States on the 23rd of February to Los Angeles. Steve Miller LP continued. But you see, he only has 1 day at Trident, which is the 22nd. He arrives in London. I'm sorry about all these dates. It's always hard. He arrives. His first day at Apple is the 14th. 15th is at Apple. 17th is at Apple. There's a missing day there. There's a 16th. He doesn't have anything. 18th, Apple. 19th, Apple. 20th, Apple. 21st, Apple. 22nd, Trident. 23rd, back to LA. Now, what was he doing at Apple during almost 6 days? Trident appears to be only 1 day. So, and also, why did Glyn go to the trouble of saying to Steve Miller, I've got to go back to London. Do you mind if I go back to London to work with the Beatles for a while? Because he wouldn't do that if he just had the 1 day at Trident. He wouldn't go back a week earlier and muck around at Apple for that 1 day. He went back and started working at Apple by the looks of it, and then went back to Steve Miller as soon as he possibly could. But it looks like he's got about 6 or 7 busy days, of which only one of them is at Trident.
And what's interesting is that Glyn Johns was originally brought in to work on the soundtrack to the TV special and then handled the Get Back album. But at some point when it switched from being a concert that they were going for to, well, let's film ourselves making the album, George Martin is back to his normal role. And by the time of the Rooftop, he's certainly down there at the desk producing, is he not?
Yes.
Yeah.
They end up at Road Studios, don't they? You just rang a bell when you mentioned did Glyn have any role to play in mixing the movie, mixing Let It Be? I mean, who mixed the sound for Let It Be?
Oh, the sound, yeah, for the film itself. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
When I was looking at this before, I can't find them on top of my head now. I saw a couple of references to him that made it look like Glyn was working on the movie. Well, look, here's one. This is September. Look at the 28th.
Right. So that would have been the cut finished in September, right?
And it's about 7 hours. He's not looking at it. It's 7 hours long, his session. So he's working on the Beatles film. And then look at the 9th of October. So that was October the 3rd. There's the 9th of October.
Just an hour. Oh, I'm looking at the 3rd. Oh, the 9th. There it is. Screening of Get Back. October 9th.
Yeah, screening of Get Back. So it looks like Glenn is at some point in October, he gets himself involved in the movie, which is sort of what you were just saying. I just think the journey of the Get Back tapes from January through to 1970 is a mysterious journey. And not just the tapes themselves physically, but the project, when the transfer from Get Back to Abbey Road to be, I just don't think the definitive history of that has been written yet. I really don't think it's been written yet.
And September of 69 is when that acetate gets leaked to that radio station. So that is in existence then too.
And the album was always follow the trajectory of the film, as opposed to parallel tracks.
When you think about it, the movie must have used the 8-track tapes, even though it was it would have been a mono film, wouldn't it, 1970? I don't think they had stereo in cinemas. When Michael's Let It Be movie was going to have a song performance on it, and I'm not talking about the rehearsal stuff at Twickenham or anything, I'm talking about something that, in Savile Row, which has 8-track. Glenn must have been involved in doing a mono version of that 8-track, because he would do an 8-track mix down probably for the album, maybe to get a stereo finished track for his album, but Michael's film would only want a mono version of the song, so he'd probably remix the 8-track down to a mono for Michael's film. So maybe that's what those are. He's remixed. Because I don't know how much of Michael's movie is made up from the 8-track tapes. Obviously, a lot of his movie is from the Nagras. But the bits of Michael's film that are from 8 tracks, Glenn would have presumably had to do a mix down onto a mono. And that includes the rooftop songs as well.
I suppose. If they weren't going to do a fold down, they were going to do a dedicated mono mix for the film.
In the movie, you'd think you'd put a little bit of effort into it. Yeah, you just sort of, want to make it sound as good as you could on mono. So that must have been Glenn. I don't know. I'm going to ask him. These are questions. I've asked him a lot of things, but I've never asked him these. Glenn, if you're listening to this, you've got a few questions coming your way, so start to think about them.
Look them up. We'll bring them on the show.
We're going to want some answers. Yeah. Yeah.
So on the subject of sound, there's a lot that you were able to unlock, just like They Shall Not Grow Old, with this written off Imperial War Museum footage that you were able to restore and make something out of. You did, I guess, the demixing treatment to a lot of this stuff, removing guitar noise and silverware in the canteen recording. You want to talk about that a bit?
Well, it's only happened in the last 6 months or so. The audio was always the albatross around the neck of this project, whatever anybody did with it. And we've been editing for 4 years. So the first 3 and a bit years were just, we had access to the 8-track. So whenever Glenn was hit the button and recorded anything on 8-track in Savile Row, we could use those tapes. And that's not just the finished performances. Glenn would be pretty stingy with his 8-tracks, unfortunately, but not like Abbey Road, who just kept things running. Glenn tended to switch off and on, but occasionally he'd let things run on and you'd get dialogue. And so any time that they think they're doing something for the album, and even though it completely falls apart, still recorded on 8-track, obviously, so we have access to all those. But most of it, of the film, I guess the majority of it, is on Nagra. Certainly all the Twickenham stuff's on Nagra. And probably at least two-thirds of Savile Row's on Nagras. I've actually had him on about how stingy he was. He used to erase tapes, which drives me nuts. The first day or two at Savile Row are erased. Because I said, where are these 8-tracks? There doesn't seem to be 8-tracks on first day at Savile Row. He said, they would have been crap, and I just erased them and used the tape again. And I thought, wasn't there a rule that you didn't do that with the Beatles at this point? But maybe he didn't get told the rule. I don't know. And so for all the reasons we know, a sort of quarter-inch Nagras mono tape is going to have all sorts of problems. There's problems with the mixing of the songs, just because you've got a film crew who's recording it on a boom mic or something, not anything that's going through a disc. Although Pete Sutton, the sound recorder, seemed to have some sort of a little mixing desk in front of him, some really primitive one, but because they had multiple microphones. At Twickenham, there's no 8-track at all until the very end. There's a bit of 8-track, but which the 8-track doesn't exist anymore. But Glenn does record a little bit of 8-track at Twickenham, which the tapes are erased. Thank you, Glenn. But most of the time they're mono, and I think Pete Sutton, the sound recorder, is a Nagra guy. I think he's got a little mixing desk with a little fader. So he's got mics. He's got sound coming in, mono sound coming in from several microphones. He's got headphones on, and he's being his own little George Martin, Glenn Johns sort of guy, mixing as they go. So there's a little bit of that, but it's still pretty rough. And then you've also got the situation where you've got background crew noise, you've got talk and chatter, two people talking at once while you're trying to listen to the music. Sometimes they're rehearsing music and you've got some crew member talking over on the side of the thing. And then you've got the sabotage that John and George do when they're trying to have a private conversation and they crank up their amps and they just start strumming because they don't want Michael Lindsay Hogg to get this on his tape. They're very aware at times, more than the cameras, because we talked about them being aware of the cameras. They're actually almost more hypersensitive to the sound being taped, their conversations being taped. And so that stuff in the bootleg, you're trying to listen to a conversation and there's some stupid idiot playing a guitar. Well, that's actually, I think, for the most part, that's deliberate. That's actually sabotage. That's the Beatles employing countermeasures to make it hard for Michael to eavesdrop on their conversations. That's not just random kind of, I'm bored with this conversation, I'm just being an asshole and twanging my guitar. That's deliberately sabotage.
Michael talked about that in interviews 50 years ago. In the interviews, as soon as the movie came out, he was saying there were times that,
So by writing this demixing programs, which I said we started this year, I mean, we wish we started it months and months ago, but we started this year by writing this demixing program. It gave us advantages in all those areas. One, we can strip the songs down to their components, the bass, the guitar, the drums, the vocals, and we can rebalance the songs so that they're a bit nicer to listen to. We can get rid of the background noise. Because, if you can teach a computer what a guitar sounds like, and what a drum sounds like, and even Paul's bass, dum, 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 all by itself. You can also teach it what background chatter is like, what crashing and banging in the studio is like. And while you want a track of the bass or a track of the drums, you can also tell it to get rid of all this other stuff as well. It can either have a track with stuff on or stuff off.
So you're talking about the music recorded on Nagras that you're using?
I'm talking about just the Nagras. And I'm talking about Twickenham and Savile Row. I mean, Twickenham's a bit worse for clatter and banging. At Savile Row, people tend to be a bit more quiet. And then, so it's useful for that. It's useful for when the Beatles are employing countermeasures. So when they're strumming their guitars loud and you can sort of half hear a conversation, but you miss words and you miss all that, then we can get rid of the guitar and the conversation's as clear as a bell. So we've done that. It's also useful to separate two conversations at once because we've taught it what some of the voices sound like. You've got to do it individually. So we've taught the computer what Michael Lindsay Hogg sounds like because he's often talking loudly and he just needs to be quiet. So we can get rid of him. And we've taught it what Paul and John sound like. So if there's two things talking at once, we can sort of, it's not that you don't want them talking at once if that's what happened, but sometimes Paul's talking and John's saying something, but Paul's on mic and John's off mic a lot. So but by separating them, you can then lift John up and drop Paul down. So you end up with a better balance. It's all to do with the balance, especially. So a lot of that stuff at Twickenham and Savile Row, that's that very frustrating stuff where one of them's sort of off mic, and often it's George actually. It seems to be off mic half the time. So you hear him, but you hear him like 3 or 4 feet away from the nearest vocal mic. We can separate George out by himself and we can just lift him up. And I mean, sometimes you get a little bit of fuzz in it by if you've got a really faint person off mic and you're lifting them up, you get a fit, but it's better to lift them up than have them faint. So sometimes it's not the perfect audio result, but at least you can listen to it and hear it.
Yeah, if you're bringing up the noise floor at the same time.
Yeah, and we can still try and get rid of that, but it always ends up, if you're lifting up a lot, it never sounds absolutely perfect. But maybe with machine learning, it would sound perfect if we had another year to work on it. Because, I mean, I don't know anything about this stuff, but machine learning does seem to be what it says. The more it learns, the better it gets. It just learns what something sounds like, and the more examples of it you feed into it, it gets better and better and better the whole time.
You just made me think of when you're talking about George being off mic, is that acoustic medley he does on the 9th, the day before he walks out. Mama, You've Been on My Mind, Rambling Woman. And for like the first half of it, his mic is like at a distance before somebody finally shoves a mic up to his mouth.
We've got a little bit of that, yeah. I don't think we've got the whole thing that you're talking about. I know what you're talking about.
I Threw It All Away.
I think we've got one of the songs. I mean, it's good to talk about this too, where a little bit of movie making sneaks in because he does that, which is that sort of romantic, nice Bob Dylan one he done. Is it?
I Threw It All Away?
Yeah, I Threw It All Away. I think it is I Threw It All Away. I'm just not familiar with Bob Dylan, I'm afraid. I don't know. But there is a nice Bob Dylan song. I think it's I Threw It All Away. And we've got that sounding quite nice. And so somewhere else in the day, we've got these shots of Linda and Paul having a cuddle off to the side. So what we do, it's weird being a movie maker, it's where it's not technically historically accurate. We've got George singing that and we cut to shots of Paul and Linda canoodling off to the side. It's very sweet. And it's not necessarily what happened on the day. Like George wasn't singing that while they were cuddling. However, George did sing that, so you're hearing that, and you're seeing them cuddling, and you're putting a little bit of soundtrack, like a movie underneath their cuddling to make it more romantic. I did do a little bit of that, but I didn't ever do it so it distorts and totally changes the essence of it. But otherwise, you got Linda and Paul just cuddling with nothing in the background, or some technician clanging and banging. It's nicer to have a Dylan song playing in the background. So you'll see a little bit of that sort of sneaking in from time to time, but I don't think I did any of it in a way that sort of tips the meaning of any scene, any particular moment, historically, in a bad way. It's where I'm wearing two hats. I'm trying to keep the film entertaining in a truthful way, rather than being an absolute anal retentive historian, documentarian type. This footage has all been tidied up. It's all cleaned up, the whole lot, not just what's in our movie. All of the 60 hours, we've restored it. We've all the audio sorted out. It's all going to go back to Apple. So at some point in the future, a real historian Mark Lewisham type can go in there and do a real download of the absolute analysis of everything. And it's a strange moral situation to be in, because if they're having a 5-minute conversation about something that we're interested in for the film, whatever the topic is, and you listen to the Nagaras, they sort of start rambling on, and they drift off onto tangents. So you have them starting to talk about a topic, and then you've got 2 or 3 of the lines of them talking. Paul and John and George says something, and then they just ramble on into repetitive and boring thing. And then a few lines later, they pick it up again, and you actually get sort of good again, and then it rambles on. And it's good. So you've got this thing, and you just want these 3 bits. So of course you just join these 3 bits together. So now you're creating a conversation that didn't actually happen. It sort of happened, but you've taken the bits out in the middle. Now that gets weird, because say you've got John, Paul, and George, and then you've chopped out a whole lot of stuff. Then you go Paul, George, and John. So now you've got George saying something and Paul saying something, and you're putting those 2 bits together, and it sort of sounds like Paul is replying to George, or it's when he wasn't, because there's a whole minute that's missing. So you do get into weird situations like that where you're thinking, God, should I be doing this or not? But I didn't do it when I thought I shouldn't be doing it. So I just had to judge it. I thought, if it's a tool distorting the reality of what was happening, then I'm absolutely not going to do it. But if I'm just taking out some boring stuff, and it sounds like George says this, and the next thing that Paul says is this, even though you're missing 45 seconds in between, if it sounds okay and it's not changing the essence of what this thing is, if it's just basically you're just taking out some crap, then I thought, well, that's okay. So I'm not going to feel all guilty about that. So, I mean, there's a lot of moral decisions they have to make when you're cutting 60 hours down to 8 hours. A lot of stuff, not just taking out big slabs, you're taking out lots of little bits all the way through, and you just want to make sure that what you end up with is a fairly, is a truthful or sort of honest account of what basically happened that day, So I just worked on it day by day. So
that was something of a failing of the original Let It Be, where they're playing across the universe, Paul yawning from you're not really sure when, and then John saying, does anybody have a fast one, from a different day?
I know. I was looking at this all the time. I was talking to Jabez, who was editing it with. I used to say, God, you could do such horrible things with this stuff. You could have on one day Paul talking about some TV show, and I mean, I'm just making this up, but he sort of says, I saw that show last night, it was okay, but basically it just turned into absolute rubbish, absolute junk, and then you could have George Harrison presenting a song for the first time, and you cut to Paul, you have the song, and you cut to Paul saying absolute rubbish, absolute junk. You could sabotage this unbelievably badly if you were not responsible. I just thought, God, really, you could create such damage by deliberately being very irresponsible when we obviously were very careful doing that. We never ever did anything that would distort what the reality was, I tried to not do too much movie maker enhancement, but there was one thing I couldn't resist doing. Is at one point, you'll see it in the film, at one point after George has left and they're getting a bit depressed about George leaving, I couldn't help but there's a beautiful demo that George does on the morning of day 17. It's not filmed. We got the 8-track of it. Isn't it a pity? It's a day when George helps Ringo with Octopus Garden at the beginning of the day. Well, George came in there about an hour earlier and did a demo with Glenn of Isn't It a Pity? Just for himself. I don't think the camera crew probably shown up for work yet. It's certainly not filmed. Glenn records it on 8-track. And it's a beautiful, I mean, I actually kind of almost prefer it to the finished song. It's a beautiful, beautiful demo. And so I couldn't help myself. But when the Beatles, back on day 7, when George has left and they're getting, as I say, they get deflated, I couldn't resist putting Isn't It a Pity over the top of that, which is a real movie maker trick. And I don't do that too often. I don't like doing that. A couple of people who've seen it said that it made them cry. So they should cry, because George has quit the band. these guys are getting depressed. It's fine if somebody cries at that because it is a sad moment. So in a way, if Isn't It a Pity creates tears from people at that time, then the tears are actually appropriate because they're looking pretty sad, the Beatles, and the audience, quite frankly, should be sad as well. It's not a very happy time. So, but I did that. I mean, that's almost the only example that I can think of, really, where I'm putting a soundtrack onto a documentary like that. But most of the time, I avoided doing that. So, and the bit with Linda and Paul was the other one.
So, did you see it as your brief to work with the tools you had in terms of the material that Michael Lindsay Hogg created, and not step outside that boundary? For example, if there was something that might have shed light on, say, George's disposition that day.
There's a little bit, yes. Yeah.
Dan's done a great job in his writing when he talks about the build-up to George walking out. Well, he had this marital discord going on at home at the same time. He probably was in some kind of physical distress because of his pending tonsillectomy. So these might have informed his particular disposition where he comes off as extra sour or sharp with people.
I think they did. I didn't go to the marital discord because I just thought it was none of my business, decided a moral judgment on that. Because there's no footage of it. I mean, all you can do is say, guess what? He was having, and it's not, I didn't want to make this really the Daily Mail or the Telegraph. They'll write up about all that stuff. I didn't go there. But I think that does answer a lot of the questions about why George leaves, because he comes in on that day 7, the day he walks out, the day he's going to walk out. Dick James is at the beginning of the day, but he comes in and he doesn't look happy. He's very distracted. And in the morning while they do, I think they work on Get Back and they work on Two of Us. I mean, he just looks alienated from them. John and Paul are kind of get it up, and George is sitting there very disengaged with it. Now, a lot of people can read that as well. He was feeling ignored by John and Paul. They were ignoring his songs. He wasn't getting enough. I think he was dealing with a lot of crap at home as well. And you'd be thinking, if you had a crisis, a personal crisis at home, you'd be thinking, why am I sitting here watching these guys do Two of Us when I've got some really bad stuff happening at home that I should go sort out? Why am I here when the more important thing in my life is I go back and sort out the stuff that's happening in my personal life? You'd just be thinking that. You'd be sitting there and you get the feeling, because I agree with you, I think that's in his head. And he's sitting there thinking, why am I sitting here? And look, the truth of it is, he goes back, he disappears, and he comes back and he's very, very happy. Patty and him have sorted things out. And you feel like the guy's actually solved the problems that he had. And I don't think he's come back to Savile Row happy because they've abandoned the TV show or whatever, or that they're in Savile Row. I mean, obviously, he's much happier being there than Twickenham, but he's a guy whose problems have been lifted off his shoulders a bit now, his personal problems. So I do think a bit of that. But to answer your question is, there's like they have a conversation about Magic Alex at one stage. So I found some newsreel footage from Pathé or Reuters thing of Magic Alex, which I hadn't seen before. It's just on a public thing, I think it's Reuters or Pathé newsreel. And there's some quite nice shots of him in colour. So while they're talking about Magic Alex, we show a little shots of him. And while the conversation carries on, we just see some images so you know what the guy looks like. And occasionally, if they talk about a pop culture reference, we show it. Like George has that bit where he's talking about I Me Mine, and he says, I turned the TV on and there was this Europa show about these guys with medals and waltzing. Well, we found footage of that and we show a bit of that. So, I do try to use outside footage, but don't cut away from it. We hear them continuing to talk and we're just illustrating what they're talking about. We don't sort of cut to a whole other little doco thing. Yeah, we do that. We do, John is one stage where they're talking about traveling to Libya and having to get ships to take the audience. And John says, well, we got ships for How I Won the War. And he says, we got the American Navy for How I Won the War. And Ringo says, yeah, well, I was there, John, and they were just passing by, and you just having to film them as they were passing by. So we went into How I Won the War, and we found that shot that Ringo's referring to with John in the foreground was with the American Navy behind him. So we throw that in there. We do a little bit of that where we could. And we have one sequence I really like, which is, I was quite pleased I did it, is a bit in day 4 at Twickenham. Towards the end of the day, they've done Across the Universe, and they just suddenly burst into rock and roll music. And they do sort of a full performance of rock and roll music. not particularly great, performance, not great recording, but I intercut that with the Japanese, the Budokan color footage of them doing rock and roll. And I say this is a song that they used to open the 66 tour. And we have the screams of the girls, which even in Japan, which is supposed to be quiet, there's plenty of screams on the soundtrack. And so you see them in Twickenham playing rock and roll. And we use the audio, the singing from Twickenham, and we put it over the shots of them performing in Budokan and cut between Twickenham, Budokan. But we use the screaming from Budokan over the Twickenham shots too. So even though they're in Twickenham all by themselves alone in the studio, you're hearing, girls, and you cut the thing. To sort of show the contrast that 2 years ago, they were singing this song into stadiums full of screaming girls. Now they're singing it all by themselves in the studio, but they're sort of the phantom ghosts of the screaming is kind of surrounding them. That was another filmmaker conceit I did. And we start the whole thing with a 10-minute prologue because it was everybody agreed that people going on to Disney Plus is possibly people that don't know who the Beatles are, or at least don't really know a lot about the Beatles. And also you've got to do the context of what Get Back actually is, what they're getting back to. So we have, I did the sort of entire, well, Jabez did more work than me on it, actually, to tell you the truth. It was done in a rush at the very end. We spent 2 days cutting a 10-minute prologue of the entire career of the Beatles from 1956 to 1968 in 10 minutes. Probably needed another couple of days' work. It's a little bit kind of, but it's like the anthology or Ron Howard's movie sort of shrunk down to 10 minutes. It's a once-over light leaf, and it's really just strictly for people that don't know much about the Beatles and need to have a little bit of a reminder of who and what they were. So the first 10 minutes of the whole thing is this is the Beatles so far, and then you get to Twickenham after 10 minutes, basically.
Have you ever seen Braverman's Condensed Cream of the Beatles?
Now, what's that? No, I don't think
It was
I
a
have.
short film produced, I want to say, maybe Dan, you can help me out, 1973 maybe?
I was going to say early to mid-70s, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen anything like that.
I'll send it to you.
No. Should we have just got the rights to that?
Well, I was going to say, if you did, because all that exists that I've seen is lousy prints of it, but it was something that, in America at least, was sort of a rite of passage in the 70s when you were desperate for anything, and it tended to get showed at like the festivals and things like that.
So it's hard. It's surprisingly hard to do 10-minute career of the Beatles without everything being so quick and so fast. It just flies by, and you just think, I've got one shot of the Cavern Club. I mean, I said we could have 2 or 3 shots of the Cavern Club. We haven't got time to sort of move on. It's like you can't stop at any one point. You just can't stop. You just got to go on through it. But anyway, I think it's certainly for people like us, it's just sit through it. It's not profound. It won't teach you anything at all about the Beatles. It's just for people, strictly for people that really just need a little bit of a tune up and what the story is prior to the Get Back sessions.
One of the interesting things I always thought about that they do during the tapes, just again from listening to the tapes, is how much they talk about their history. You can get their entire history all lined up just by listening to them talk.
Well, I think more than that, I think of how little they talk about Ed Sullivan, how little they talk about Shea Stadium, but how much they talk about Hamburg, how much they talk about the old days. It's like what I love, and it happens a couple of times, once to Glyn and once to George Martin. I can't remember where we got the Glyn one in there, but we got the George Martin one in there where they're complaining to George Martin about the speakers, the PA system and everything else they've got. And Paul says, when we were at the Top 10 Club, we had a great sound system, but then George Martin just cuts them off. He just says, look, ladies, I'll do it to fix it. I mean, George Martin does not want to hear how good the Top 10 Club sound system was. If you think if you're George Martin, you're the great George Martin with all the equipment and everything, and you've got this guy saying how great the Top 10 Club sound system was. Why can't we have the Top 10 Club? I mean, George Martin just cuts them off. He does not want to hear about the bloody Top 10 Club sound system. Thank you very much. It's quite funny. But they do go on about, I mean, they do have a very romantic, and they talk about several times about the Cavern Club, even to the point that they wonder if they should do the show at the Cavern Club. I don't think it's a serious thing, but that's really sort of what they want to do in theory. They want to be a little club band. I mean, they talk about the Cavern Club, but not in any way that it's an absolute serious idea at all. But it's the sort of, it's the notion of it. It's the prototype of what they want to try and do.
There's a direct line from that idea being floated to what would happen on September 20th at Apple when Paul brings it up. We should just show up anonymously and play a small club. And John goes, well, I was going to tell you, but I want a divorce.
And then a direct line from that to the early Wings days.
That's right.
Exactly.
Universities, yeah.
And the funny thing is, Lennon remembers, he talks about when we were a club band, that's when we made music. Our best stuff was never recorded. So here is Paul offering that opportunity on a platter to him, and he bats it away.
But it's also not only that, it is sort of the philosophy behind the Get Back idea, isn't it? Kind of. It is sort of the overriding idea behind the Get Back sessions is to go back to being what that band that John is describing, really.
Right. And there's a thread from that. If you look at the production apex of Bing Pepper, the White Album, much more organic, much more stripped down. And then this is a step beyond that. None of your production crap, George Martin. It's got to be perfect takes every time.
I mean, one of the things that's interesting is that whole thing. There's one moment where Paul says to Glenn Johns, they're talking about it. It's sort of towards the rooftop. It's the day before the rooftop, I think. Paul's having a little freak out or something, and he says to Glenn, well, of course, the idea with this project was originally we were going to do this live performance for TV, and it was going to be White Album songs. That was the original idea, and then obviously they decided to do original ones. But Paul says that, I think at the very start, and that's not I don't think that's the Roundhouse thing he's talking about. I think it is the Twickenham thing where we're going to go to Twickenham, rehearse, and maybe just even a few days before January the 2nd, they thought that they'd just be doing White Album songs. And then it sounds like it was almost at the last minute, and it would have presumably been Paul, that they thought, let's not do White Album, let's do new songs.
That's quite a curve to throw on your bandmates at the last minute.
Well, I'm just speculating, because Paul says it was originally going to be White Album songs. So you're thinking, okay, well, at what point did the White Album idea drop and this new one come in? And because they come into Twickenham so unprepared, they don't usually come in with unprepared. They usually come in with better formed songs than that. I wonder if it did get thrown at them at the last minute, that they thought going into Christmas that they were going to assemble in Twickenham and do a White Album concert, and then suddenly, the 31st of December, Paul, or 30th, he phones them all up and says, guess what, I think it's original songs we should be. You wonder whether or not they're guys who aren't coming in with the songs, John, they're not really prepared. I wonder if it's because the plan got changed on them at the last minute. I wonder.
I thought about that in terms of why you would do that. You've just spent 6 months crafting 30 songs. You've just released a double album. You're going to do any kind of project or special on the heels of a brand new release. To completely take it off the table for consideration, certainly in the current day, it makes no sense whatsoever as a career move. But what I sort of concluded is, well, maybe because he knew he was going to be filming the rehearsals, the idea started to form, get the creativity on film, which you ended up getting.
I think you're right, because otherwise you're just filming them do rehearsals for Happiness is a Warm Gun or Back in the USSR, or, they're not really rehearsing that. Yeah, they're sort of practicing a well-known song that they've done because they're going to perform it live and they want to just warming up on the song. No, you're right. I mean, if maybe the idea is, well, if these weren't White Album, they were new, and we got a camera crew in, because maybe the camera crew wasn't even a plan with the White Album. We get a camera crew and they'll be able to film us doing new songs, which we've never done before. Because Paul was always thinking, what haven't we done? What things haven't we done? No one's filmed us actually coming up with new songs. And maybe, combining the idea of the White Album concert with, if they're new songs, we can be filmed. So now you're getting two things at once. You're getting a concert with new songs and you're getting a film of them doing the songs. I mean, maybe Paul was piecing this thing together, and then they arrive on the 2nd and he's still trying to piece it together, and they're wondering, well, what is this thing? Because it does feel a bit ill-considered. On day one, it doesn't seem to be a definite solid plan.
That's the astonishing thing.
It's still a bit fluid. It's quite fluid.
We know they're up against the hard deadline of Ringo and having access to him, and therefore they're locked into this, but they don't have the end game figured out at all for the first, at least until George's walkout. How are we ending this thing? And that conversation you were alluding to before, where Paul's talking about it's too far out, going up on the roof. The whole idea I conceived this for was to have some kind of audience involvement. You put us on the roof. What audience?
And then George says one of the most sensible things that anybody says in those early days is George Harrison. On the 2nd day, he says to them, now, are we going to do any goldies and oldies in the show?
Right.
And they, well, don't know. He says, well, people haven't bought this album. The album's not going to be on sale, and they're going to be coming to watch us, and they're just hearing all new songs. Should we either do the songs and have the album on sale first and then do the show? So they buy the album for a week or so, and then you come in, or should we at least put some golden oldies and goldies? So I don't know. I want to hold your hand into the show. Just pepper it with those, just like artists do now. They're releasing a brand new album, and they're going to make sure they put a lot of their old hits into the show to lure people in. And George is saying the most sensible thing on earth. Shouldn't we actually have a few old songs in this that people actually recognise, that people can sing along with? If we're going to have all these new ones, we should have a few old ones, shouldn't we? And it's like Paul and John have never even considered this before. it's one of the more sensible ideas that comes out in the first few days. It's like, yeah, you think, well, that's actually a pretty good idea, George. That's a very good idea.
I think one of the things that's going to be laid to rest, one of the myths that your film is going to completely rewrite is that, especially John loudly 3 interviews talking about, well, Paul and I stopped collaborating years ago. When it's pretty clear, first of all, when they bring in very early on, I Got a Feeling, obviously they got together and worked that out, how they were meshing those 2 songs together. Obviously a very tight window if they decided to go from White Album songs to brand new songs, but you've got them on film working on songs together.
I read somewhere, and again, I sort of stopped believing what I read now. Now, having read all the Get Back stuff over 40 years, I kind of no longer going to believe anything. But I did read something that John went round to Paul's house at Cavendish Avenue for a few days in December, collaborating. I think that's when I've Got a Feeling and Everyone Had a Hard Year blends, because it's already blended on day one at Twickenham. There's a lot still they're working out on the song, but they certainly have combined them. And I did read that John and Paul had a few days together at Paul's house in December. Now, maybe that was because they were preparing for the January 2nd start, perhaps. They did do a little bit of that. And also, when they're doing Give Me Some Truth, John says, I really like that Hangman bit of yours, that Money for Rope, Money for Dope bit. And so they've got together on Give Me Some Truth outside of the Get Back sessions. I mean, the Get Back sessions has got sort of them doing a half-hearted sort of run-through, but they have been working on it together outside of this. So maybe that was, again, another one that they were doing at Paul's house in December. They certainly were together collaborating on stuff seemingly in December 1968 in Paul's house, for sure they were. And I think it would have been in preparation probably for this impending sort of writing, recording, rehearsal session in January, probably.
And you do have the conversation on the 13th, which I think you said was day 8, where Paul is leading that conversation minus John and Yoko, and they talk about collaborating and you guys still writing together. And he talks about the impact Yoko has when she's around, that he feels like he needs to write to please her. And then he talks about I Will specifically.
Looking at the wall.
So whereabouts has Paul been working with John with Yoko around? It's probably in this period that we're talking about, isn't it? Probably.
But we also see in the movie, and Robert, to your point, we also know on the tapes, and I think it's going to be in the movie, writing Get Back. I mean, we see them working together on the lyrics to Get Back. I mean, it's right in front of you.
You see it on Dig Pony. You see it on all sorts of things.
Don't Let Me Down. I remember early in the sessions, Don't Let Me Down. I know the words are written, but John says, I don't know the order these 3 parts of the song should be. And Paul arranges it. And then George decides to take the the riff. And he said, well, we should move this over here. And they work together to get that song. What
really surprised me and made me very happy to see it is, especially in Savile Row, how involved George is in the collaboration with John and Paul's songs. And he's very, very vague. He's full of ideas. He's not sort of sitting back because it's not his songs and he doesn't want to be there, all this sort of stuff, and he's just going to do what he's told. He's excited about the songs. He likes them. He clearly likes them. He's wanting to contribute. He's wanting them to be as good as they can. They're going to have the Beatles stamp on them, and he has pride in that, and he's working hard. And, the interesting thing about George, like anybody, like me, is that you can judge other people's work and have ideas and be creative and be constructive much better than you can with your own stuff. I see that in George so much. When it comes to one of his songs, he's nowhere near as confident. He's nowhere near got that sort of, he's nervous. He knows that the Lennon-McCartney eyeballs are swinging around on him. He sort of feels a bit in the spotlight. It's actually quite touching. And that's, again, where maybe the pictures show you a lot more than what you'll ever feel in the Niagaras. You see how literally nervous George is sometimes. It's not the sense of they don't care about my songs and they don't give me enough time, which is, there's a little bit of that at Twickenham. But when they're at Savile Row and they are putting a lot of attention to George, it's almost the amount of attention they're putting onto his songs, which I think they're compensating for their earlier misdemeanors. And they've decided they're going to do a lot better with George, which is part of that hidden microphone conversation at lunch. I think the sheer amount of focus and attention that John and Paul are putting on George's songs is kind of intimidating him a little bit and putting him under the spotlight. It's quite sweet. It's actually, I just find it quite touching and sweet,
That's very interesting because I think that's, again, one of the interpretations Sulpy's book has is that they couldn't care less about his material, and that leads to him walking out. Clearly, there's some remarks made, especially when he brings in I Me Mine, and I think George makes the remark at some point in the sessions, we should treat other people's material as if we'd written it ourselves. You remember that, Dan? Something that he says along the way. So he clearly must have been feeling, you're describing his own insecurity with his own material and being almost daunted when they are giving him the time of day, but he must have been feeling a lack of support.
Yeah, I mean, I feel at Twickenham, what I feel at Twickenham with All Things Must Pass is really the big one at Twickenham also, is that I feel that John and Paul, there's a period of time when John and Paul are there to help him as best they can, and they're waiting for him to give them some ideas about what they can do. And he's really hasn't got anything, he can't direct them. In other words, he can't say, now, I think it would be great if Paul, if you could do a bass line like this, and John, if you could do this, and if you could put harmonies here. He's not directing them to help him. He's sort of a bit at sea, and they are trying, and I don't know whether all of this is in the final cut of the film or anything, but it's certainly in the rushes where they are trying for a period. They're trying, and should we do this? Should we do this? And I think John and Paul are struggling. They're actually struggling to contribute to I'm in Mine, not because they don't care, but because they are thinking, what can we do to lift this song up? And they can't really figure anything out particularly. And I think because George wants to keep rehearsing it, he's not giving them a great deal of notes or help. And they can't, without the notes coming from George, they themselves run out of ideas. But he wants to rehearse, and because they've run out of ideas, it becomes like, we'll just do it again with George. George wants to do it again. And they sort of dry up. I think it's just that one song. They really don't have a big creative vision for that song. And they do other George songs. It's just that one, they kind of just can't, I don't think they can get their heads around how do we lift this song and really kind of make it something. And George hasn't got ideas either, particularly, and yet they sort of just end up rehearsing it, which obviously just John and Paul just. And so I don't think it's necessarily because they're doing it out of contempt for George. I think they just can't quite nail the song. Eventually, if you can't nail something, yet you're still rehearsing it, and you run out of ideas, you don't know what, you sort of, it just becomes a little bit mechanical. And at that point, it feels a bit like, John and Paul aren't really trying very hard. Well, they have been trying for 20 takes, and now you're on to take 25. And no, they're not trying very hard on take 25 because they literally can't think of what to do. I think there's a bit of that really is going on with All Things Must Pass in particular,
Yeah, that's one that they labored on probably more than anything else that he came up with, except for maybe For You Blue, which eventually they nailed pretty quickly. It's a pretty basic song. But he does make the remark when he brings in I'm in Mine, having watched that special the night before, now he's got a waltz. I don't give a shit if you like it or not.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, it's the other big mysterious thing he says, because I'll use it in my show. That thing of him and Derek are writing a stage musical, presumably about Apple. I mean, it's got a name. I forget the name. I heard the name of what the show's called. Derek and George's show. It's got a title. It sounds like it's a live Broadway or West End show about Apple Corps. And George and Derek are collaborating, and George obviously is doing the songs. I guess Derek's probably writing the script. George says, if you don't like it, I'll stick it in the show. Then immediately think, well, how much of this show actually kind of happened? How much did Derek write? Is there an outline for this show that's somewhere in the files of Apple? Is there something is there something interesting we could see? I know very little about that show. Very little's written. I guess there might be something in Derek's book. I haven't gone back and looked at his 50 Years Adrift book. There might be something about it in there, I guess.
Yeah, that's the one I haven't read because it's the $3,000 book.
It wasn't $3,000 when I bought mine. I bought mine back in 1980, whatever I did. It was a lot cheaper then.
Well, you could look it up for us.
You could start casting for that. That could be your next film.
Yes.
The other thing with I'm in Mine that, and this is based on Let It Be, I guess, is I've read something, and it wasn't in the Sulpy book or anything, but it was in some other book I read that John has such contempt for I'm in Mine that then when they're trying to rehearse it, he just waltzes around with Yoko because he can't be bothered. And that was very much there. He does work on I'm in Mine. He does use the guitar, and he thinks, and George agrees, that really it needs to be stripped down and there's not really a place for the guitar. And so they're doing a show, and they're very much talking about this show. It's not just like, let's write songs for an album. We're going to perform these in front of TV cameras. And so John and Yoko start waltzing around, and they're waltzing because we've seen the Europa thing where all these people are waltzing. It's very much a waltz thing. In Europa, the TV show, everyone's waltzing around to whatever that Blue Danube thing or whatever it was that's playing. And so, they waltz around. George and Paul and Ringo are doing I'm in Mine as a trio. And George, when the waltz finishes, he says, that's fantastic. Let's put the waltz in the show. That'll be really great if we're singing and you're dancing around. Now, that's not a guy who's got such contempt for the thing that he's just waltzing around while these guys are trying to do the song. I mean, George is excited that they're actually dancing, and thinks
right. He's thinking in visual terms of the TV
it would
presentation.
be great for the show, and he agrees that there isn't actually anything for John to do on the song. It works just fine with three of them. So again, it's where the mythology and the reality is just not. It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not true.
Yeah, that kind of negative spin. But I guess negative spin was attached to every aspect of it when it came out.
And that's the reason we have that song at all, is because the visual was used in the film, and they then had to go back and actually record it.
Something About the Beatles, created and hosted by Robert Rodriguez, executive producer Rick Way, title song by the Corgis.